Marcus Thompson stood in his garage at 6 in the morning. He wore old jeans and a plain gray t-shirt. His hands moved carefully as he cleaned his motorcycle. The black Harley-Davidson was his pride and joy. He had bought it after coming back from his last mission overseas. The morning air was cool and quiet. Most of his neighbors were still sleeping. Marcus liked this time of day. It reminded him of early morning missions when everything was calm before the action started. But those days were behind him now. He was 42 years old and had been retired from the Navy for 3 years. His daughter Sarah walked into the garage. She was 16 and had his dark hair and serious eyes. She carried 2 cups of coffee and handed one to him. "Morning, Dad," she said with a smile. "Morning, sweetheart," Marcus replied. He took the coffee and smiled back at her. Sarah was the reason he had left the military. After her mother died in a car accident 5 years ago, Marcus knew he needed to be home more. The Navy SEALs had been his life for 20 years, but Sarah needed him more. They had moved to Willowbrook subdivision 2 years ago. It was a quiet neighborhood with nice houses and good schools. The kind of place where kids could ride bikes safely and parents did not worry much. Marcus wanted Sarah to have a normal life, something he never had growing up. "Are you going to ride to work today?" Sarah asked. She liked his motorcycle but worried when he rode it. "Not today." "I have meetings all day," Marcus said. He worked for a security company now. It was not as exciting as his old job, but it paid well and kept him close to home. Sarah nodded and sipped her coffee. She was getting ready for school. Her senior year had just started and she was excited about graduation next spring. She wanted to study journalism in college. Marcus was proud of her. She was smart and kind. Nothing like the hard soldiers he used to work with. "Did you remember the HOA meeting is tonight?" Sarah asked. Marcus stopped cleaning his bike. The HOA meeting. He had forgotten about it. The Willowbrook Homeowners Association met every month. Marcus had been to a few meetings when they first moved in. They seemed like normal people who cared about keeping the neighborhood nice. "What time?" he asked. 7 o'clock at the community center, Sarah said. "They sent that letter about new rules last week." Marcus remembered the letter. The HOA wanted to add new rules about parking and lawn care. They also wanted to raise the monthly fees. Marcus did not care much about neighborhood politics, but he always paid his fees on time. He kept his house and yard in perfect condition. "Old habits from the military, I might go," he said. "Depends on how late I work." Sarah finished her coffee and headed back inside to get ready for school. Marcus watched her go. She was growing up fast. Sometimes he worried about being a single father. The military had not taught him much about raising teenage girls. Marcus finished cleaning his motorcycle and put his tools away. Everything in his garage had a place. His tools were organized by size and type. His workbench was clean and empty. Even his old military gear was stored in neat boxes on metal shelves. Some habits never died. He walked around his house to check the yard. The grass was cut exactly 2 inches high. The edges were perfectly trimmed. His flower beds had no weeds. The driveway was swept clean. Marcus took pride in his property. It was different from the military bases where he used to live, but he applied the same attention to detail. His neighbor Jim was getting his newspaper from the driveway. Jim was about 50 years old and worked at the bank downtown. He waved at Marcus. "Morning, Marcus," Jim called out. "Nice day, isn't it?" "Sure is," Marcus replied. He liked Jim. The man was friendly but not nosy. He did not ask too many questions about Marcus's past or why a single father and teenage girl had moved to their quiet street. "You going to the HOA meeting tonight?" Jim asked. "Maybe," Marcus said. "What do you think about these new rules they want?" Jim shrugged. "Some of them make sense, but Robert Chen and his crowd can be pretty strict about things. They gave the Johnsons a fine last month because their grass was a 1/4 inch too long." Marcus raised an eyebrow. That seemed excessive, but he did not say anything. He preferred to avoid neighborhood drama. His years in the military had taught him to pick his battles carefully. "Well, I better get to work," Jim said. "See you around." Marcus waved goodbye and went back inside. Sarah was eating breakfast and checking her phone. She looked up when he came in. "Dad, Jenny's mom can drive me home from school today. We're working on a project together," she said. "That's fine," Marcus said. "I'll probably be home by 6 anyway." Marcus made himself breakfast and sat down across from Sarah. Their kitchen was simple but comfortable. Sarah had picked out most of the decorations when they moved in. She wanted it to feel like home. not like the temporary quarters they had lived in on military bases. "How's school going?" Marcus asked. "Good," Sarah said. "Mr. Peterson assigned our first big writing project yesterday. We have to interview someone who has done something important and write their story." "Sounds interesting. Who are you going to interview?" Sarah grinned. "I was hoping I could interview you." Marcus nearly choked on his coffee. "Me? I'm not that interesting, sweetheart. Are you kidding?" Sarah said. "You were a Navy SEAL for 20 years. You've been all over the world. You've done things most people only see in movies." Marcus was quiet for a moment. He rarely talked about his military service with Sarah. She knew he had been in the Navy, but he had never told her many details. Some stories were too hard to tell. Some memories were better left buried. "We'll see," he said finally. "Let me think about it." Sarah smiled and gathered her school books. She gave him a quick hug before heading out the door. Marcus watched from the window as she walked to the bus stop. She was laughing with some other kids from the neighborhood. This was exactly what he had wanted for her. A normal life with friends and school activities. Marcus got dressed for work and climbed into his pickup truck. As he drove through the neighborhood, he noticed how peaceful everything looked. Nice houses with well-kept yards. Kids playing in front yards. People walking their dogs. It was a far cry from the dangerous places he used to work. At the end of his street, he passed the community center where the HOA meeting would be held that night. A sign in front announced the meeting and encouraged all residents to attend. Marcus decided he would try to make it. It was important to stay involved in Sarah's community, even if he preferred to keep a low profile. As he drove to work, Marcus thought about how much his life had changed. 3 years ago, he was leading dangerous missions in foreign countries. Now he worried about HOA meetings and his daughter's homework. It was different, but he was happy. Sarah was happy too, and that was all that mattered to him. Marcus Thompson had no idea that his quiet life in Willowbrook was about to change forever. The Willowbrook Community Center was packed that Tuesday night. Marcus arrived a few minutes after 7 o'clock. He had stayed late at work to finish a security report. Most of the folding chairs were already taken, so he stood in the back of the room. Robert Chen stood at the front of the room behind a small table. He was about 45 years old with gray hair and wire-rimmed glasses. He wore a dark blue suit that looked expensive. Next to him sat Janet Moore, the HOA secretary. She was a thin woman in her 50s with short blonde hair. On the other side sat Derek Walsh, the enforcement officer. Walsh was a big man with thick arms and a red face. He looked like he spent a lot of time at the gym. "Thank you all for coming tonight," Robert Chen began. His voice was loud and confident. "We have several important issues to discuss that affect our community." Marcus listened as Chen talked about the monthly budget and upcoming repairs to the playground. Everything seemed normal until Chen started talking about the new rules. "We need to address some ongoing problems in our neighborhood," Chen said. "Too many residents are not following our current guidelines. We see cars parked incorrectly, lawns that are not properly maintained, and decorations that do not meet our standards." A woman in the front row raised her hand. "What kind of problems are you talking about? I thought everything looked fine." Derek Walsh stood up. "Last month alone we issued 47 violation notices," he said. His voice was harsh and unfriendly. "People think they can do whatever they want just because they own their houses." Marcus frowned. 47 violations seemed like a lot for a neighborhood of only 200 homes. He looked around the room and saw other people looking uncomfortable too. Janet Moore opened a thick folder. "We have photos of all the violations," she said. "Cars parked at the wrong angle in driveways. Grass that was too long or too short. Garden decorations that were not approved colors." An elderly man near Marcus spoke up. "I got one of those violation notices. You said my mailbox was the wrong shade of black. I had to repaint it and pay a $50 fine." "Rules are rules, Mr. Peterson," Chen replied. "If we let people ignore small violations, soon everyone will think they can do whatever they want." Marcus remembered Mr. Peterson. He lived 3 houses down from Marcus and Sarah. His yard was always neat and his mailbox looked fine to Marcus. A $50 fine for the wrong shade of black seemed unreasonable. Chen continued talking about the new rules. Cars could only be parked in specific ways. Lawn grass had to be between 1.5 and 2.5 inches tall. No decorations were allowed without written approval. The monthly HOA fees would increase from $75 to $125. What happens if someone can't pay the higher fees? asked a young woman holding a baby. We have payment plans available, Janet Moore said. But if someone falls behind on their fees, we can place a lien on their property. Marcus felt his jaw tighten. A lien meant the HOA could eventually force someone to sell their house if they could not pay the fees. That seemed like a severe punishment for what was supposed to be a community organization. Derek Walsh was walking around the room now. He had a clipboard and was writing notes as he looked at people. When he walked past Marcus, their eyes met for a moment. Walsh looked Marcus up and down like he was sizing him up. Marcus stared back calmly until Walsh moved on. We also need to talk about motorcycles, Chen said. Several residents have complained about noise and inappropriate vehicles. Marcus felt his attention sharpen. He was probably one of only 3 or 4 people in the neighborhood who owned a motorcycle. Motorcycles can only be parked in garages, Chen continued. They cannot be left in driveways overnight. They also cannot be started before 8 in the morning or after 6 in the evening. Marcus almost laughed. He always parked his bike in the garage and never started it early or late. But the new rule would mean he could not work on it in his driveway during the day. He had been planning to change the oil this weekend. A man in the middle of the room stood up. "This is getting ridiculous," he said. "We bought houses here, not prison cells. You can't control every little thing we do." Derek Walsh turned to face the man. "Actually, we can," Walsh said. "When you bought your house, you signed an agreement to follow HOA rules. If you don't like it, you can move somewhere else." The room got very quiet. Marcus could feel the tension building. Walsh's tone was threatening and aggressive. This was not how community leaders should talk to residents. An older woman near the front raised her hand. "My husband and I have lived here for 10 years. The HOA used to help the community. Now it feels like you're trying to punish us." "We're trying to protect property values," Chen replied. "A neighborhood with strict standards keeps home prices high. That benefits everyone." Marcus doubted that was true. He had lived in many places during his military career. The best neighborhoods were ones where people cared about each other, not where they lived in fear of petty rules. The meeting continued for another hour. Chen, Moore, and Walsh presented their new rules like they were already decided. When residents asked questions or complained, the 3 board members dismissed their concerns. They acted like they were doing everyone a favor by controlling their lives. Marcus noticed that several people left early. They looked frustrated and angry. The ones who stayed seemed scared to speak up after seeing how Walsh responded to criticism. Finally, Chen called for a vote on the new rules.
"All in favor?"
he asked. Only about 10 people raised their hands. Most of the room sat silent. All opposed? About 30 people raised their hands. "The measure passes," Chen announced. Marcus was confused. The vote was clearly against the new rules. He raised his hand. "Excuse me, but more people voted against than for." Chen looked at Marcus with annoyance. "Board members count as 3 votes each. Plus we count property owners who are not present as voting yes." Marcus felt anger building in his chest. That was not how voting was supposed to work. They were basically ignoring what the residents wanted and doing whatever they pleased. After the meeting ended, Marcus walked to his truck. Jim was getting into his car nearby. "What did you think of that?" Jim asked. "Seems like they've forgotten who they work for," Marcus replied. "It wasn't always like this," Jim said. "Chen got elected last year and brought his friends with him. Since then, it's been one new rule after another. My neighbor got fined because her dog barked twice while she was at work." Marcus shook his head. "Why doesn't someone run against them in the next election?" "People are scared," Jim said. "Walsh has been taking pictures of everyone's houses looking for violations. If you complain about the board, suddenly you're getting fines for things that were never problems before." As Marcus drove home, he thought about what Jim had said. Using fear to control people was something he had seen in other countries, in places where democracy did not exist. He never expected to see it in his own neighborhood. When he got home, Sarah was doing homework at the kitchen table. She looked up when he came in. "How was the meeting?" she asked. "Interesting," Marcus said. He did not want to worry her with the details. "They want to add some new rules. Anything that affects us?" Marcus thought about the motorcycle rule. "Maybe, nothing major." Sarah went back to her homework. Marcus got a glass of water and sat down across from her. He watched her working on her math problems. She was focused and serious, just like he had been at her age. But she was growing up in a much different world than he had. Marcus had joined the military to serve his country and protect people's freedom. Now he was watching 3 people take away his neighbor's freedom, one petty rule at a time. It felt wrong, but he was not sure what he could do about it. That night, as he got ready for bed, Marcus looked out his bedroom window at the quiet street. Everything looked peaceful and normal, but he knew that underneath the surface, trouble was building. The HOA board was drunk on power and getting worse. Eventually, they would push too hard and someone would push back. Marcus hoped it would not be him. He just wanted to live quietly and raise his daughter in peace. But his experience had taught him that bullies rarely stopped on their own. They kept pushing until someone made them stop. As he fell asleep, Marcus had no idea how soon that lesson would be tested. The HOA board had noticed the quiet man who asked questions at their meeting, and they had decided to make sure he knew who was really in charge of Willowbrook. 3 weeks after the HOA meeting, Marcus received his first violation notice. It was a Friday morning, and he found the bright yellow paper stuck to his front door when he left for work. The notice was signed by Derek Walsh. It said Marcus had parked his motorcycle in his driveway for more than 2 hours on Tuesday afternoon. The fine was $75. Marcus had to pay within 10 days or face additional penalties. Marcus stared at the paper in disbelief. He had been changing the oil on his motorcycle that Tuesday. The work had taken about 3 hours, but the bike was in his own driveway the entire time. He had never parked it on the street or in anyone's way. Sarah came outside carrying her school backpack. She saw the yellow paper in his hand. "What's that?" she asked. "Nothing important," Marcus said. He folded the paper and put it in his pocket. He did not want Sarah to worry about neighborhood politics. At work that day, Marcus had trouble focusing on his security reports. The violation notice bothered him more than it should have. It was not about the money. $75 would not hurt his budget. It was the principle of the thing. Marcus had spent 20 years defending people's rights and freedoms. Now some power-hungry HOA board was trying to control where he could park his own motorcycle in his own driveway. It felt like a personal attack on everything he had fought for. That evening, Marcus called the HOA office. Janet Moore answered the phone. "I received a violation notice today," Marcus said. "I'd like to discuss it." "Name?" Janet asked in a bored voice. "Marcus Thompson, 247 Maple Street." He heard papers shuffling. "Yes, I see it here. Motorcycle parked in driveway for more than 2 hours. The fine is $75. The motorcycle was in my driveway while I worked on it," Marcus explained. "I wasn't parked illegally anywhere." "The new rules state that motorcycles cannot remain in driveways for more than 2 hours, Janet said. "You were clearly in violation, but I was actively working on the bike. I wasn't just leaving it parked there." "It doesn't matter what you were doing," Janet replied. "The rule says 2 hours maximum. If you want to dispute the fine, you can request a hearing with the board." Marcus thought about the hearing option. Based on what he had seen at the community meeting, the board was not interested in being reasonable. "How do I request a hearing?" he asked. "Fill out Form 27B and submit it with a $50 hearing fee," Janet said. "If the board agrees with your violation, you pay the original fine plus the hearing fee. If they agree with you, you only pay the hearing fee." Marcus almost laughed. The system was designed to make money for the HOA either way. Even if he won, he would still have to pay $50 for the privilege of defending himself. "I'll think about it," Marcus said, and hung up. The next morning, Marcus decided to pay the fine. $75 was cheaper than fighting it, and he had more important things to worry about. He wrote a check and dropped it off at the HOA office, but the violation notices did not stop. 2 weeks later, another yellow paper appeared on his door. This time, Derek Walsh claimed Marcus's grass was 2.7 inches tall. The acceptable range was 1.5 to 2.5 inches. The fine was $60. Marcus went outside and measured his grass with a ruler. Most of it was exactly 2.0 inches. A few areas near the edges might have been slightly longer, but nowhere near 2.7 inches. Walsh was either making up numbers or measuring wrong on purpose. Again, Marcus paid the fine. He did not want to escalate the conflict, but he started to notice Derek Walsh driving slowly past his house several times a week. Walsh would stop his car and take pictures with his phone. Sometimes he got out and walked around Marcus's property looking for problems. Sarah noticed too. "Dad, why is that man always taking pictures of our house?" she asked one Saturday morning. Marcus looked out the window. Walsh was standing on the sidewalk with his phone pointed at their driveway. He works for the neighborhood association, Marcus said. Don't worry about it, but Marcus was starting to worry. Walsh's behavior was getting strange and aggressive. Normal HOA enforcement did not involve taking dozens of photos of one house every week. The third violation notice arrived on a Tuesday in October. Marcus was supposed to leave for a business conference in Atlanta that weekend. The notice claimed his mailbox was improperly positioned and needed to be moved 6 inches to the left. The fine was $85. Marcus looked at his mailbox. It was in exactly the same position it had been when he bought the house 2 years ago. None of his neighbors had ever mentioned any problem with it. But according to the violation notice, it was now blocking the sidewalk and creating a safety hazard. This time, Marcus decided to fight back. He took detailed photos of his mailbox from every angle. He measured the distance between the mailbox and the sidewalk. He even found the original HOA documents from when he bought the house, which showed the mailbox position had been approved. Marcus called the HOA office and requested a hearing. Janet Moore sounded annoyed when she told him to submit Form 27B with his $50 fee. The hearing was scheduled for the following Tuesday evening. Marcus planned to attend and present his evidence. He hoped that showing the board actual facts would make them see reason. But on Friday morning, Marcus got a call from his security company. There was an emergency situation at a client's office in Atlanta. Marcus needed to fly out that afternoon and would not be back until Sunday night. Marcus called the HOA office to reschedule his hearing. Janet Moore told him it was too late to change the date. If you don't appear at your scheduled hearing, the board will assume you accept the violation, she said. You'll have to pay the original fine plus the hearing fee plus a $50 no-show penalty. I have a work emergency, Marcus explained. I can't control when my company needs me to travel. That's not our problem, Janet replied. The hearing is Tuesday at 7 p.m. Be there or pay the penalties. Marcus felt his temper rising. The total penalties would be $185 for a mailbox that was not even violating any rules. But he had no choice. His job required him to travel, and the client emergency could not wait. Marcus flew to Atlanta that Friday afternoon. He spent the weekend working long hours to resolve the security crisis at the client's office. The whole time he thought about the unfair HOA hearing he was missing. On Sunday evening, Marcus called Sarah from his hotel room to check on her. Everything's fine, Dad, she said. Jenny's mom invited me for dinner tonight, so I won't be home alone. Good, Marcus said. I should be home around 10 p.m. tomorrow. If you need anything, call Jim next door. I will, Sarah promised. Oh, and Dad? That Walsh guy came by again today. He took more pictures of the house and wrote something on his clipboard. Marcus felt a cold anger building in his chest. Walsh was harassing his property while he was away. That crossed a line from petty enforcement to something more personal. Did he bother you? Marcus asked. No, I was inside. I just saw him from my bedroom window. He was here for like 20 minutes taking pictures of everything. After Marcus hung up, he sat on his hotel bed thinking. The HOA board was not just enforcing rules anymore. They were targeting him specifically. The violation notices were getting more frequent and more ridiculous. Walsh was spending an unusual amount of time monitoring his property. Marcus wondered if this was retaliation for his questions at the community meeting. Maybe the board did not like residents who challenged their authority. Maybe they were trying to make an example of him. If that was their plan, they had picked the wrong target. Marcus had dealt with real enemies in real dangerous situations. 3 suburban bullies with clipboards and violation notices did not scare him, but Marcus also knew he had to be careful. Sarah was his priority, and he did not want neighborhood politics to affect her life. She was a senior in high school with college applications to worry about. The last thing she needed was drama with the HOA. Marcus decided to continue paying the fines for now. It was expensive and unfair, but it was easier than fighting. He would keep detailed records of everything the board did. If their harassment got worse, he would have evidence to take to a lawyer or the police. As Marcus packed his suitcase for the flight home, he had no idea that the situation was about to get much worse. Derek Walsh and the HOA board were planning their next move, and this time, they were going to target something Marcus cared about more than money or property. They were going to target Sarah. Saturday morning started like any other weekend for Sarah Thompson. Her father had left early for his business trip to Atlanta. She had planned to spend the day working on college applications and hanging out with her friend Jenny later. Sarah was in the kitchen making breakfast when she heard a car door slam outside. She looked through the window and saw Derek Walsh getting out of a white HOA. Two other people were with him, a woman with short blonde hair and a tall man in khakis. Sarah recognized them from the HOA meeting she had attended with her father last month. The woman was Janet Moore, and the man was Steve Kirkland, another board member. All three of them looked serious as they walked up the driveway toward the house. The doorbell rang. Sarah hesitated before answering. Her father had taught her to be careful when she was home alone. But these were neighborhood officials, not strangers. She opened the door but left the chain lock attached. "Can I help you?" she asked through the small opening. Derek Walsh stepped forward. He was a big man with thick arms and a red face. Up close, he looked even more intimidating than he had at the meeting. "We need to speak with your father," Walsh said. His voice was loud and unfriendly. "He's not home," Sarah replied. "He's traveling for work." "When will he be back?" Janet Moore asked. She was holding a clipboard and looked impatient. "Tomorrow night," Sarah said. "Can I give him a message?" Walsh looked annoyed. "We're here about multiple violations of HOA regulations. Your father's motorcycle is in clear violation of community standards." Sarah looked past them toward the garage. The motorcycle was parked inside, just like always. She could see it through the open garage door. "The motorcycle is in the garage," she said. "It's not bothering anyone." "That's not the point," Steve Kirkland spoke up. He was tall and thin with a sharp voice. "The motorcycle itself violates our vehicle standards. It's too loud and inappropriate for a family neighborhood." Sarah was confused. Her father's motorcycle was not particularly loud. He was always careful about when he started it and never revved the engine unnecessarily. Several other neighbors had motorcycles too. "I think you need to talk to my father about this," Sarah said. "I don't know anything about HOA rules." Walsh stepped closer to the door. "Actually, as a resident of this property, you're responsible for following the rules too. We need to inspect the motorcycle and determine if it needs to be removed." "I can't let you inspect anything," Sarah said. "My dad isn't here and I don't have authority to make decisions about his property." "Listen, little girl," Walsh said, his voice getting harder. "We're the HOA enforcement team. We have the right to inspect any property that's in violation. You can cooperate with us or we can make this a lot more difficult." Sarah felt her heart start to beat faster. Walsh's tone was threatening, and he was standing very close to the door now. She could smell coffee and cigarettes on his breath. "I'm sorry, but you'll have to wait until my father gets home," she said. She tried to close the door, but Walsh put his hand against it. "We're not leaving until this is resolved," Walsh said. "Either you let us inspect the motorcycle or we're calling for it to be towed immediately." "You can't do that," Sarah said. "It's on private property." Janet Moore stepped forward with her clipboard. "Actually, we can. The HOA has the authority to remove vehicles that violate community standards. We can have a tow truck here in 30 minutes. Sarah felt trapped. She did not know if they were telling the truth about their authority, but they seemed very confident. She also did not want her father's motorcycle to be towed while he was away. "Okay," she said finally. "You can look at the motorcycle. But I'm not signing any papers or agreeing to anything." Walsh smiled, but it was not a friendly smile. "Smart girl. Now unlock this door so we can do our job." Sarah removed the chain and opened the door. The three board members pushed past her into the house. Walsh was so big that he bumped into her shoulder as he walked by. "The garage is this way," Sarah said, leading them through the kitchen. In the garage, Walsh walked around the motorcycle taking pictures with his phone. Janet Moore wrote notes on her clipboard. Steve Kirkland opened the motorcycle's storage compartment and looked inside. "Definitely not appropriate for this neighborhood," Walsh announced. "Too big, too loud, wrong color scheme." Sarah thought that was ridiculous. The motorcycle was black with some chrome parts. It looked like most other motorcycles she had seen. "What's wrong with the color?" she asked. "Black motorcycles give off an aggressive, intimidating image," Janet Moore said. "Our community standards require vehicles to project family-friendly values." "That doesn't make any sense," Sarah said. "Half the cars in the neighborhood are black." Walsh turned to face her. His expression was angry. "Are you questioning our authority, young lady?" "I'm just saying the rule doesn't make sense," Sarah replied. She was trying to stay calm, but these people were making her uncomfortable. "You don't get to decide what makes sense," Walsh said. He stepped closer to Sarah. "Your family has been causing problems since you moved here. Your father thinks he can ignore our rules and disrespect our authority. My father follows all the rules, Sarah said.
He's paid every fine you've sent him, even the unfair ones. Unfair?
Steve Kirkland laughed. Your daddy been telling you stories about the mean old HOA? Sarah felt her face get hot. Don't talk about my father that way. Walsh moved even closer. I'll talk about him any way I want. He's a troublemaker who thinks his military background makes him special. Well, this isn't the army, and he doesn't get to call the shots here. You need to leave, Sarah said. Her voice was shaking now. You've seen the motorcycle. Now go. We're not done here, Walsh said. This motorcycle is being towed today. Right now. No, it's not, Sarah said. You can't take my father's property without talking to him first. Walsh grabbed Sarah's arm above the elbow. His grip was tight and painful. Listen to me, little girl, he said. We're the authority in this neighborhood. When we say something is happening, it happens. Your father isn't here to protect you, so you're going to cooperate. Sarah tried to pull her arm away, but Walsh's grip was too strong. Let go of me, she said. Not until you understand how things work around here, Walsh replied. Janet Moore was recording everything with her phone. We need documentation of the homeowner's non-compliance, she said. Sarah realized they were not just trying to intimidate her. They were creating some kind of record to use against her father later. She jerked her arm hard and managed to break free from Walsh's grip. Get out of my house, she said loudly. Get out right now. Walsh's face got even redder. You're making a big mistake, kid. We tried to handle this nicely. He grabbed for Sarah again, but this time she was ready. She stepped back and tried to run toward the door that led back into the house. But Steve Kirkland moved to block her path. Where are you going? Kirkland asked. We're not finished talking. Sarah felt panic rising in her chest. These three adults were in her garage, blocking her exit and making threats. One of them had already grabbed her arm hard enough to hurt. She needed to get away and call for help. Move, she said to Kirkland. I don't think so, he replied. Sarah tried to push past him, but Kirkland was much bigger than her. As she struggled to get by, Walsh grabbed her arm again, this time with both hands. You're going to listen to what we have to say, Walsh said. Your family needs to learn some respect. Sarah twisted and pulled, trying to get free. In the struggle, she stumbled and fell to the concrete garage floor. Her knee hit hard and she felt a sharp pain shoot up her leg. Janet Moore kept recording with her phone. Subject is resisting lawful HOA enforcement, she said into the phone like she was making an official report. Sarah scrambled to get back on her feet. Her knee was bleeding and her arm was sore where Walsh had grabbed her. These people were not just enforcing rules anymore. They were attacking her. Please leave me alone, Sarah said. She was crying now, which made her feel ashamed, but she could not help it. Stop being dramatic, Walsh said. We're just trying to resolve a community issue. But Sarah could see in his eyes that he was enjoying her fear. This was not about motorcycles or community standards. This was about power and control. They wanted to hurt her family, and her father was not here to stop them. Sarah knew she had to get away and call someone for help. But with all three board members standing between her and the door, she was trapped in her own garage with nowhere to run. Marcus Thompson's plane landed at the airport at 9:30 p.m. on Sunday night. The business trip to Atlanta had been successful, but he was tired and ready to be home. As he drove through the quiet streets of Willowbrook, he thought about the HOA hearing he had missed and the penalties he would have to pay. The house was dark when Marcus pulled into his driveway. Sarah's car was there, which meant she was home safe. That was all that mattered to him after 3 days away. Marcus unlocked the front door and called out softly. Sarah, I'm home. Dad? Sarah's voice came from upstairs. She sounded different somehow. Shaky. Yeah, it's me, Marcus said, setting down his suitcase. How was your weekend? Sarah appeared at the top of the stairs. Even in the dim light, Marcus could see that something was wrong. She was moving carefully like she was hurt. What happened? Marcus asked, immediately alert. His military training kicked in automatically when he sensed danger or injury. Sarah came down the stairs slowly. When she reached the bottom, Marcus could see bruises on her arm and a bandage on her knee. Who did this to you? Marcus asked. His voice was quiet, but Sarah could hear the steel underneath. It was the HOA people, Sarah said. They came here yesterday while you were gone. They said they needed to inspect your motorcycle. Marcus felt a cold fury building in his chest, but he kept his voice calm. Tell me exactly what happened. Sarah sat down on the couch and Marcus sat beside her. She told him about Derek Walsh, Janet Moore, and Steve Kirkland coming to the house. She explained how they had demanded to inspect the motorcycle and threatened to have it towed. I let them in because I thought I had to, Sarah said. I didn't know what else to do, Marcus nodded. Sarah had done nothing wrong. The HOA members had taken advantage of a teenager whose father was away. They grabbed me, Sarah continued. Walsh grabbed my arm when I tried to make them leave. Then when I tried to get away, Kirkland blocked me and Walsh grabbed me again. I fell down and hurt my knee. Marcus examined the bruises on Sarah's arm. They were finger-shaped marks from where Walsh had gripped her. The sight of them made something dark and dangerous stir inside Marcus's chest. Did they hurt you anywhere else? Marcus asked. No, Sarah said. After I fell, I think they got scared. They left pretty quickly, but Dad, they were recording everything with their phones. They kept saying it was for documentation. Marcus stood up and walked to the window. He looked out at the quiet street, but his mind was racing. 3 adults had come into his home while he was away. They had physically assaulted his 16-year-old daughter. They had left her bruised and bleeding on his garage floor. Sarah, Marcus said, turning back to her, I need you to tell me every detail you can remember. Every word they said, everything they did. Can you do that? For the next hour, Sarah recounted the entire incident. Marcus listened without interrupting, filing away every detail. When she finished, he asked a few specific questions to clarify the timeline and the exact sequence of events. You did good, sweetheart, Marcus said finally. You handled a scary situation as well as anyone could have. I was so scared, Sarah admitted. Walsh was so big and angry, and they kept saying they had the right to do whatever they wanted. Marcus sat back down next to Sarah and put his arm around her shoulders. They had no right to touch you. What they did was assault, and it's illegal. No HOA has the authority to physically harm residents. What are we going to do? Sarah asked. Marcus was quiet for a moment. In his mind, he was already planning. But this was not like his military missions. This was personal, and it involved his daughter's safety. First, we're going to document everything, Marcus said. I'm going to take pictures of your injuries. Then we're going to call the police and file a report. Will they arrest Walsh? I don't know, Marcus said honestly. But we're going to make sure there's an official record of what happened. Marcus got his camera and carefully photographed Sarah's bruises from multiple angles. He also took pictures of her scraped knee and the bandage she had put on it. The evidence was clear that she had been physically assaulted. As he worked, Marcus felt the familiar calm focus that had served him during dangerous missions overseas. His emotions were locked away in a secure place where they could not interfere with his thinking. Right now he needed to be strategic, not emotional. But underneath the calm surface, Marcus was furious. He had spent 20 years fighting to protect people's freedom and safety. He had risked his life in foreign countries to defend American values. And now in his own neighborhood, 3 bullies had attacked his daughter in his own home. After documenting Sarah's injuries, Marcus called the police. The dispatcher said an officer would come to the house within an hour to take a report. While they waited, Marcus made Sarah some tea, and they sat together on the couch. Sarah was calmer now that her father was home, but Marcus could see she was still shaken by what had happened. Dad, Sarah said quietly, there's something else. I think they've been watching our house even more since you left for Atlanta. I saw Walsh drive by like 5 times yesterday morning before they came to the door. Marcus nodded. That fit with the pattern of harassment he had already documented. The violation notices, the excessive fines, Walsh taking photos of their property. It was all part of a systematic campaign of intimidation. But attacking Sarah crossed a line that Marcus would not tolerate. The HOA board had just escalated this conflict into something much more serious than petty rule. Enforcement Officer Jennifer Santos arrived at 10:45 p.m. She was a woman, in her 30s with a professional manner and kind eyes. She listened carefully as Sarah described the assault and Marcus showed her the photos of the injuries. This is definitely assault, Officer Santos said after hearing the full story. The HOA enforcement position doesn't give anyone the right to physically restrain or harm residents. What happens next? Marcus asked. I'll file a report tonight, Santos said. On Monday, you can decide if you want to press charges. You should also consider getting a restraining order to keep these individuals away from your property. After Officer Santos left, Marcus helped Sarah get ready for bed. She was exhausted from the stress of the weekend and the trauma of the assault. Try to get some sleep, Marcus said. You don't have to worry about this anymore. I'm going to handle it. How? Sarah asked. Marcus was quiet for a moment. I'm going to make sure they never bother you again. After Sarah went to bed, Marcus sat alone in his kitchen with a cup of coffee. He opened his laptop and began researching everything he could find about the Willowbrook HOA board members. Derek Walsh worked as a sales manager at a car dealership. He had been divorced twice and had a history of complaints filed against him for aggressive behavior. Janet Moore was a real estate agent who had been investigated for financial irregularities in her previous job. Steve Kirkland owned a small construction company that operated without proper permits. Marcus also researched HOA law and discovered that the board had exceeded their authority in numerous ways. They had no right to enter homes without permission, no authority to physically restrain residents, and no power to seize property without following specific legal procedures. As Marcus gathered information, a plan began to form in his mind. The HOA board thought they could intimidate a single father and his teenage daughter. They thought their little bit of neighborhood authority made them untouchable. They were about to learn how wrong they were. Marcus had dealt with real enemies in real dangerous situations. He knew how to gather intelligence, plan operations, and execute them with precision. The skills that had made him an effective Navy SEAL would now be used to protect his family from 3 suburban bullies. But this time, Marcus would not use violence to solve the problem. This time he would use something more powerful than physical force. He would use the law, the truth, and the very community standards the HOA claimed to represent. Derek Walsh, Janet Moore, and Steve Kirkland had made the biggest mistake of their lives. They had attacked the daughter of a man who had spent 20 years learning how to neutralize threats to innocent people, and Marcus Thompson was just getting started. Marcus Thompson did not sleep much that Sunday night. While Sarah rested upstairs, he sat at his kitchen table with his laptop, systematically gathering intelligence on the 3 people who had attacked his daughter. His military training had taught him that information was the most powerful weapon in any conflict. Before taking action, you needed to understand your enemy completely, their strengths, weaknesses, motivations, and vulnerabilities. Marcus started with Derek Walsh. A simple internet search revealed that Walsh worked at Premier Auto Sales on the south side of town. His LinkedIn profile showed he had been there for 3 years after being fired from 2 previous dealerships. Marcus found customer review websites where multiple people complained about Walsh's aggressive sales tactics and bad temper. Digging deeper, Marcus discovered that Walsh had been arrested twice in the past 5 years. Once for disturbing the peace at a bar fight, and once for road rage when he got out of his car to threaten another driver. Both charges had been reduced to small fines, but they showed a pattern of violent behavior. Walsh's social media accounts revealed even more. He posted angry rants about immigrants, complained constantly about his ex-wives, and shared memes about how real men handle problems with their fists. His Facebook page was full of photos showing him at bars, often looking drunk and aggressive. Marcus also found Walsh's divorce records online. Both ex-wives had filed restraining orders against him. The court documents described incidents of domestic violence, property destruction, and threatening behavior. Walsh was clearly a man with serious anger management problems. Janet Moore was next. As a real estate agent, she had a professional website and social media presence. But Marcus's research showed that her business was struggling. She had sold only 3 houses in the past year, and online reviews from clients were mostly negative. More concerning were the financial records Marcus was able to access through public databases. Moore had filed for bankruptcy 2 years ago and still owed significant money to multiple creditors. Her previous job at a mortgage company had ended when she was investigated for falsifying loan documents. Marcus found something else interesting in the HOA financial records that were posted on the community website. The association's budget showed several large expenses that were not clearly explained. Payments to consultant services and administrative fees that did not seem to have any real purpose. Cross-referencing these payments with Moore's business records, Marcus discovered that she had set up a consulting company just 6 months ago. The company had no website, no employees, and no obvious services, but it had received over $8,000 from the HOA in the past 4 months. Steve Kirkland's background was equally problematic. His construction company, K&K Contractors had a D- rating from the Better Business Bureau. Customers complained about shoddy work, missed deadlines, and inflated bills. Several people had sued Kirkland for damage he caused to their properties. Marcus also discovered that Kirkland was operating his business without proper licenses. The county required contractors to have specific permits and insurance coverage. Kirkland had neither. He was essentially running an illegal business while serving on an HOA board that claimed to uphold community standards. Even more interesting, Marcus found records showing that Kirkland had done work for several Willowbrook residents in the past year. People who had later received violation notices for minor infractions. It seemed like Kirkland was using his HOA position to generate business for his company. By 3 a.m, Marcus had compiled detailed profiles of all 3 board members. They were not upstanding community leaders. They were petty criminals and con artists who had found a way to use the HOA as their personal power base and money-making scheme. But Marcus needed more than just background information. He needed proof of their current illegal activities, and he needed to understand exactly how they were abusing their authority. Marcus spent Monday morning calling neighbors and former HOA board members. He presented himself as a concerned resident who wanted to understand how the association worked. Most people were happy to talk, especially once they learned he was asking questions about the current board. Mrs. Patterson, who had served on the board for 10 years before Walsh's group took over, was particularly helpful. The HOA used to be about maintaining property values and organizing community events, she told Marcus over coffee at her kitchen table. But ever since Robert Chen became president and brought his friends in, it's become something else entirely. What do you mean? Marcus asked. They've turned it into their personal business, Mrs. Patterson said. Walsh uses his enforcement position to intimidate people he doesn't like. Moore has been steering HOA contracts to her own companies, and Kirkland gets work by threatening people with violations if they don't hire him. Mrs. Patterson showed Marcus a folder full of complaint letters that residents had written about the current board. There were dozens of them, describing everything from excessive fines to harassment to attempted extortion. Why hasn't anyone reported this to the authorities? Marcus asked. People are scared, Mrs. Patterson explained. Walsh has made it clear that anyone who complains will face retaliation. He knows where everyone lives and has the power to make their lives miserable. With constant violations and fines, Marcus also learned something crucial from Mrs. Patterson. The HOA had security cameras installed at the community center and pool area. But there was another camera that most people did not know about. My neighbor Jim has a security system that covers his whole front yard, she said. His camera can see quite a bit of the street, including your driveway. He might have footage of what happened on Saturday. That afternoon, Marcus visited Jim next door. Jim was happy to help once Marcus explained what had happened to Sarah. Those HOA people have gotten completely out of control, Jim said as he pulled up the security footage on his computer. I've been thinking about moving just to get away from their harassment. Jim's camera had indeed captured the entire incident. The footage clearly showed Walsh, Moore, and Kirkland arriving at Marcus's house. It showed them staying for over an hour. Most importantly, it showed Sarah limping as she walked them to their car, and it captured the moment when she appeared to be crying. Can you make me a copy of this? Marcus asked. Absolutely, Jim said. I hope you nail those bullies to the wall. Marcus now had video evidence of the assault, documented injuries, a police report, and detailed background information on the 3 perpetrators. But he wanted one more piece of the puzzle before he took action. That evening, Marcus drove to the community center and parked across the street. The monthly HOA board meeting was that night, and he wanted to observe how Walsh, Moore, and Kirkland behaved when they thought no one was watching. Marcus sat in his truck with a pair of binoculars he had kept from his military days. He watched as residents arrived for the meeting, looking nervous and intimidated. He saw Walsh standing by the entrance, glaring at people as they walked past him. Through the windows, Marcus could see the meeting in progress. Walsh was standing over residents as they spoke, using his size to intimidate them. Moore was taking notes and photos of everyone who asked questions. Kirkland was walking around the room like he was looking for troublemakers. It was exactly what Marcus had expected. The 3 board members were running the HOA like their personal kingdom, using fear and intimidation to control their neighbors. Marcus had seen enough. He now understood exactly who he was dealing with and how they operated. More importantly, He had evidence of their crimes and a plan to stop them. But Marcus was not going to confront them directly. That would be playing by their rules, and it might put Sarah at risk of further retaliation. Instead, Marcus was going to use a different approach. He was going to dismantle their power base systematically and legally. He was going to expose their crimes to the proper authorities, and he was going to make sure they faced consequences for attacking his daughter. Derek Walsh, Janet Moore, and Steve Kirkland thought they were untouchable because they controlled a small neighborhood association. They were about to learn that real power came from having the law, the community, and the truth on your side. Marcus Thompson had spent 20 years serving his country by protecting innocent people from bullies and criminals. Now he was going to protect his own community from the bullies who had taken control of it. The counterattack was about to begin. Marcus Thompson spent the next week executing his plan with military precision. He made phone calls, gathered documents, and set meetings with people who had the power to hold the HOA board accountable. His first stop was the office of District Attorney Patricia Hayes. Marcus had researched her background and knew she had a reputation for prosecuting public corruption cases. He made an appointment through her assistant and arrived with a detailed folder of evidence. "Mr. Thompson," DA Hayes said as she reviewed his documentation, "this is quite impressive. You have video evidence of assault, financial records showing embezzlement, and proof of extortion. How did you gather all this information so quickly?" "I have experience with investigations," Marcus said simply. "The question is whether you're willing to prosecute people who abuse positions of authority." Hayes looked through the video footage from Jim's security camera. She could clearly see Sarah limping and appearing distressed after the confrontation with the board members. "Assault on a minor is a serious charge," Hayes said. "Combined with the financial crimes, we're looking at multiple felonies. I'll have my office start building cases against all 3 board members immediately." Marcus's next meeting was with Captain Rodriguez of the County Sheriff's Department. Rodriguez was responsible for investigating financial crimes in homeowner associations. "We've been getting complaints about Willowbrook for months," Rodriguez told Marcus, "but most residents were too scared to provide concrete evidence. What you've brought us changes everything." Marcus showed Rodriguez the financial records proving that Janet Moore had been funneling HOA money to her fake consulting company. He also provided documentation of Steve Kirkland's unlicensed contracting business and evidence that Walsh had been using his enforcement position to threaten residents. "We can shut down Kirkland's business immediately," Rodriguez said. "He's been operating without licenses or insurance, which puts his customers at risk. Moore's embezzlement scheme is clear fraud, and Walsh's pattern of assault and intimidation gives us grounds for multiple charges." Marcus's third meeting was with attorney Elizabeth Chen, who specialized in HOA law. Ironically, she was Robert Chen's sister, and she had been disgusted by what her brother's board had become. "I've been waiting for someone to challenge my brother's abuse of power," Elizabeth told Marcus. "What they did to your daughter was the last straw. I'll represent you and any other residents who want to sue the HOA for civil rights violations." Elizabeth explained that the HOA had exceeded their legal authority in numerous ways. They had no right to enter homes without permission, no power to physically restrain residents, and no authority to seize property without following proper legal procedures. "We can sue for damages, force new elections, and put the HOA under court supervision," she said. "Your case will set a precedent that protects other communities from this kind of abuse." Marcus also contacted investigative reporter David Park from the local newspaper. Park had been looking for a story about HOA corruption and was excited to expose what was happening in Willowbrook. "This is exactly the kind of abuse that happens when small-time officials get drunk on power," Park told Marcus. "I'll run a full investigation that will make sure the whole community knows what these people have been doing." By Friday, Marcus had all the pieces in place. The authorities were ready to take action, the lawyer was prepared to file lawsuits, and the reporter was ready to publish his story. But Marcus wanted to give the HOA board one chance to face their victims before the hammer fell. Marcus requested an emergency HOA meeting for Saturday evening. According to the association's bylaws, any resident could call for such a meeting with proper notice. Marcus made sure the notice was posted legally and sent to all residents. Saturday evening, the community center was packed. Word had spread through the neighborhood that something big was happening. Marcus had spent the week quietly talking to residents and encouraging them to attend. Derek Walsh, Janet Moore, and Steve Kirkland sat at their usual table in front of the room. They looked annoyed and confused by the large turnout. Robert Chen was there too, though he had tried to distance himself from the enforcement actions. Marcus stood at the back of the room until everyone was seated. Then he walked slowly to the front carrying a large folder of documents. "Good evening," Marcus said in a calm, clear voice. "My name is Marcus Thompson. Most of you know me as the quiet guy who lives on Maple Street with his daughter Sarah." The room was completely silent. Walsh, Moore, and Kirkland were staring at Marcus with obvious hostility. "What some of you don't know," Marcus continued, "is that I'm a retired Navy SEAL. I spent 20 years serving our country and protecting people from bullies and criminals." Marcus opened his folder and pulled out a photograph. It was a picture of Sarah's bruised arm, taken the night she was assaulted. "Last Saturday, while I was away on business, 3 members of this HOA board came to my house," Marcus said. "They forced their way inside, threatened my 16-year-old daughter, and physically assaulted her. This is what my daughter looked like after Derek Walsh finished with her." The room erupted in gasps and angry murmurs. People turned to stare at Walsh, who was turning red and starting to stand up. "That's a lie," Walsh shouted. "We were conducting legitimate HOA business." Marcus remained calm. "I have video footage of the entire incident, taken by a neighbor's security camera. I also have a police report and medical documentation of my daughter's injuries." Marcus turned to face the crowd. "But that's not all. These 3 people have been running a criminal enterprise using the HOA as their cover." Marcus presented his evidence systematically. He showed financial records proving Janet Moore's embezzlement scheme. He displayed documents showing Steve Kirkland's illegal business operations. He read from police reports detailing Derek Walsh's history of violence. "Janet Moore has stolen over $8,000 from your HOA fees," Marcus announced. "Steve Kirkland has been operating an unlicensed construction business and using his board position to extort customers. Derek Walsh has a criminal history of assault and domestic violence." The crowd was getting angrier by the minute. People who had been living in fear of the HOA board were realizing they had been victimized by common criminals. Moore tried to interrupt. "You can't prove any of this. These are just accusations." Marcus smiled coldly. "Actually, I can prove all of it. That's why District Attorney Patricia Hayes will be filing criminal charges against all 3 of you on Monday morning." The room fell silent again. Walsh, Moore, and Kirkland looked at each other in panic. "Sheriff's deputies are also standing by to arrest Derek Walsh for assault and battery on my daughter," Marcus continued. "Steve Kirkland will be charged with operating an illegal business and fraud. Janet Moore will face embezzlement charges." Marcus turned back to the crowd. "But the criminal charges are just the beginning. Attorney Elizabeth Chen is filing a civil lawsuit against the HOA for civil rights violations. Every resident who has been illegally fined or harassed will be entitled to compensation." Walsh finally exploded. He jumped up from his chair and started walking toward Marcus with his fists clenched. "You think you're so tough because you were in the military?" Walsh yelled. "This is our neighborhood. We make the rules here." Marcus did not move as Walsh approached. He simply looked at the bigger man with the calm, steady gaze that had intimidated enemies in much more dangerous situations. "Mr. Walsh," Marcus said quietly, "I would strongly advise you not to assault anyone else tonight. There are 60 witnesses here, and I suspect some of them are recording this meeting." Walsh stopped a few feet away from Marcus. For the first time, he seemed to realize that his usual intimidation tactics were not going to work. Marcus was not afraid of him. "You have no idea who you're messing with," Walsh said, but his voice had lost some of its confidence. "Actually, I know exactly who I'm dealing with," Marcus replied. "You're a small-time bully who got a little bit of power and thought it made you untouchable. You're used to intimidating people who can't fight back." Marcus stepped closer to Walsh. "But you made a mistake when you attacked my daughter. You see, I've spent 20 years dealing with people who threaten innocent civilians. I know how to neutralize threats like you." The room was dead quiet. Everyone could feel the tension between the 2 men. "The difference is," Marcus continued, "I'm not going to handle this the way I used to handle threats overseas. I'm going to handle it the American way, with evidence and law and justice." As if on cue, the community center doors opened and 3 sheriff's deputies walked in. Captain Rodriguez was with them carrying arrest warrants. "Derek Walsh, Janet Moore, Steve Kirkland," Rodriguez announced. "You're under arrest." The next few minutes were chaos as the 3 board members were handcuffed and read their rights. Walsh tried to resist and had to be physically restrained by 2 deputies. Moore started crying and claiming it was all a misunderstanding. Kirkland just sat there looking stunned. As they were led away, the residents of Willowbrook began to cheer and applaud. For the first time in over a year, they were free from the fear and intimidation that had controlled their neighborhood. Marcus packed up his folder of evidence and prepared to leave. 6 months after the arrests, Marcus Thompson stood in his garage working on his motorcycle. It was a Saturday morning in spring, and the garage door was open to let in the warm air. His daughter Sarah was helping him change the oil, something she had started doing after the HOA incident. "Hand me that wrench," Marcus said, pointing to his toolbox. Sarah found the right tool and passed it to him. She was 18 now and would be starting college in the fall. The events of last autumn seemed like a distant memory, but they had changed both of them in important ways. "Dad," Sarah said, "Mrs. Patterson stopped by yesterday while you were at work. She wanted to thank you again for everything you did." Marcus smiled. Mrs. Patterson had been elected as the new HOA president in a special election held 2 months after the arrests. The entire board had been replaced with people who actually cared about the community. "She didn't need to thank me," Marcus said. "I just did what anyone would do to protect their family." "Not everyone would have known how to do it the right way," Sarah replied. "You could have just beaten up Walsh when you found out what he did to me, but you chose to use the law instead." Marcus finished tightening a bolt and looked at his daughter. "Violence is sometimes necessary to protect people," he said, "but it should always be the last option, not the first one. What Walsh and his friends did was wrong, but destroying them with my fists wouldn't have helped the other families they were hurting." The legal consequences for the former board members had been severe. Derek Walsh was sentenced to 2 years in prison for assault, battery, and conspiracy. He also faced a civil lawsuit from Sarah that resulted in a substantial financial settlement. Janet Moore received 18 months in prison for embezzlement and fraud. The court ordered her to pay back all the money she had stolen from the HOA, plus additional fines and penalties. Her real estate license was permanently revoked. Steve Kirkland got 1 year in jail and was banned from operating any business in the county without proper licenses and supervision. Several of his former customers had sued him for damages, and he had been forced to declare bankruptcy. Robert Chen, the former board president, had not been charged criminally because he had not directly participated in the assault or the financial crimes, but he had been voted out of office and publicly humiliated when the full extent of his board's corruption was revealed. The civil lawsuit against the HOA had been settled for $200,000, which was distributed among residents who had been illegally fined or harassed. Marcus and Sarah donated their portion to a foundation that helped military families transition to civilian life. "Are you nervous about college?" Marcus asked as they finished the oil change. "A little," Sarah admitted, "but I'm excited too. And I know I can handle whatever comes up. You taught me that people who try to bully others are usually just scared themselves." Marcus was proud of how Sarah had handled the aftermath of the assault. She had testified confidently during the criminal trials and had not let the incident make her afraid or bitter. If anything, it had made her stronger and more determined to stand up for what was right. The journalism program at the state university had accepted Sarah for the fall semester. She wanted to become an investigative reporter like David Park, who had broken the HOA corruption story. His articles had led to investigations of similar problems in other neighborhoods across the county. "I got a letter from the Navy yesterday," Marcus said casually as they cleaned up their tools. Sarah looked up with interest. "What did they want?" "They're starting a new program to help veterans transition to civilian careers in law enforcement and security," Marcus explained. "They asked if I would consider teaching at the training center." "That sounds perfect for you," Sarah said. "You could help other soldiers learn how to use their skills to protect people without having to fight wars." Marcus had been thinking about the offer seriously. His current security job was fine, but it did not give him the sense of purpose he had felt during his military service. Teaching other veterans how to serve their communities might be a way to continue protecting people while staying close to home. The neighborhood had changed dramatically since the arrests. The new HOA board had eliminated most of the petty rules that Walsh and his friends had imposed. They focused on actual community issues like maintaining common areas and organizing social events. The monthly meetings were friendly gatherings where residents discussed real problems and worked together to solve them. Children played safely in the streets again. People talked to their neighbors without fear of being reported for violations. Marcus had been asked to run for the HOA board himself, but he had declined. He preferred to support the community from behind the scenes rather than be in a position of authority. His neighbors respected his privacy and his choice to remain the quiet man who kept his yard neat and helped out when needed. Jim wants to know if you're coming to the neighborhood barbecue next weekend, Sarah said. Probably, Marcus replied. Are you bringing that boyfriend of yours? Sarah blushed. She had started dating a classmate named Mike, who was planning to study engineering in college. Marcus had met him several times and approved of the young man's respectful manner and serious attitude toward his studies. Maybe, Sarah said. Mike is nervous about meeting more of my family friends. He knows what you used to do for a living. Marcus laughed. Tell him I only intimidate people who deserve it. If he treats you right, he has nothing to worry about. As they put away the tools, Marcus reflected on how much his life had changed over the past few years. When he first retired from the Navy, he had thought his days of fighting for justice were over. He had planned to live quietly and let other people handle the world's problems. But the HOA situation had taught him that protecting people was not something you retired from. There would always be bullies who tried to abuse their power and hurt innocent people. The location and the enemy might change, but the mission remained the same. The difference was that now Marcus fought with evidence and law instead of weapons and tactics. He used community organizing instead of military operations. He built coalitions instead of leading assault teams. Dad, Sarah said as they walked back toward the house, I want you to know that I'm proud of what you did. Not just for me, but for everyone in the neighborhood. I'm proud of you too, Marcus replied. You handled a scary situation with courage and dignity. You're going to be a great reporter. That afternoon, Marcus and Sarah drove to the community center for a meeting about the upcoming neighborhood barbecue. The same room where Walsh, Moore, and Kirkland had once terrorized residents was now filled with friendly conversation and laughter. Mrs. Patterson was organizing volunteer schedules while other residents planned games and activities for children. Everyone was working together to create the kind of community event that had been impossible under the old board's reign of fear. Marcus, Mrs. Patterson called out when she saw him. Thank goodness you're here. We need someone to help organize the security for the event. What kind of security? Marcus asked. Nothing serious, she said with a smile. We just need someone to make sure the grills don't catch fire and that the bounce house doesn't blow away. The kind of problems a normal neighborhood has. Marcus chuckled. I think I can handle that kind of mission. As the meeting continued, Marcus noticed how different everything felt. People spoke freely without looking over their shoulders. Parents made plans for their children without worrying about violating obscure rules. Residents disagreed about small details without fear of retaliation. This was what he had fought for during his military career. The freedom for ordinary people to live ordinary lives without fear. The fact that he had been able to create that same freedom in his own neighborhood made all the stress and conflict worthwhile. After the meeting, Marcus and Sarah stopped by Jim's house next door. Jim wanted to show Marcus the new security camera he had installed to replace the old one that had captured the assault footage. This one has better night vision, Jim explained as they stood in his driveway. Not that I expect to need it for evidence anymore, but it's good to have. Speaking of evidence, Marcus said, have you heard anything about Walsh in prison? Jim nodded grimly. My cousin works at the county jail. He says Walsh has been getting into fights with other inmates. Turns out bullies don't do well when they can't pick on people who are weaker than them. Marcus felt no satisfaction in hearing about Walsh's troubles. The man was facing the consequences of his own choices, but Marcus took no pleasure in anyone's suffering. What about Moore and Kirkland? Sarah asked. Moore is in a minimum security facility, Jim replied. She's been working in the prison library and apparently keeping her head down. Kirkland got out last month but had to move in with his sister because he lost his house. As they walked back home, Sarah asked her father a question that had been on her mind for months. Dad, do you ever regret not handling this the military way? Walsh really hurt me, and he could have hurt other people too. Would it have been wrong to just make him stop more directly? Marcus thought carefully before answering. It was an important question, and Sarah deserved an honest response. In a war zone, sometimes you have to make quick decisions to protect people,